So we're going to talk about a couple different conic sections. Okay, and what conic sections is if you have what is called a double napped cone, which essentially is, if you can imagine this, and then one more put on top of it at the points. That is what is called a double napped cone. So circles, ellipses, parabolas, hyperbolas are all called conic sections because they are the cross sections formed when a double napped cone is sliced by a plane. So first we're going to talk about parabolas. Parabola is a set of all points equidistant from a fixed line, which is what is called the directrix, and a fixed point, which is called a focus. Everything else that we talked about previously, way back at the beginning of the year, everything else will still be there. These are going to be kind of the two new things. And what this sentence is getting across, and you don't have to write this anywhere, just look up here. So if you've got a parabola, you've got inside of it, there's a point that is called a focus. The directrix is going to be outside it. Okay, and what it's saying is any point from the focus to the parabola, that is the same distance from there to there as it is from there to there. The same distance from there and there. Okay. Your directrix is always going to be perpendicular to your axis of symmetry. We are also going to talk about something called, and this is the other thing that's new. There's really three things that's new. What is going to be called the p-value, which is the distance from the focus to the vertex. Okay, but we'll get to that. That kind of sums up, in a nutshell, today's lesson. All right, your vertex is your midpoint of a segment from the focus to the directrix. So you do need to know how those fall in relation to each other. So if you have the focus, the vertex, and the directrix, this distance is the same as this distance. All right, and that vertex is always right in the middle of the focus and the directrix. Then you've got your axis of symmetry. It's the line that will go through both the focus and the directrix, and it splits the parabola. We talked about that. Talked about that earlier in the year. So make sure you have everything up there that's written in red. One thing that is not on here that I want you to know is your vertex, and we've written this before, but it has definitely been a while. That is going to be HK. Okay, and all you have to write an equation is your vertex and whatever that p-value is. Okay. Again, I kind of referenced it earlier. The p-distance is the distance from the vertex to the focus, whether it is vertical or horizontal, and from the vertex to the directrix. So those are the same distances there. Looking at just vertical, if that p-value is positive, then it's going to go up. It's going to open up. If it's negative, it's going to open down. Those same rules apply to the horizontal, just with right and left. So positive p-value is right, negative p-value is left. Now, looking up at the forms up top, what is the difference in those two? It's all got the same letters, but okay, they're flipped, kind of, but that's whenever we get to identifying vertical versus horizontal, I don't necessarily want you to think that way. What is being squared on the vertical? The x. What's being squared on the horizontal?
Y.
The y. So if you're looking at an equation and x is squared, it's a vertical parabola. If y is squared, it's a horizontal parabola. Okay, so if I'm writing an equation, and again, you don't have to write this. Let's say I have a vertex of 3, 2. My p-value is 2. And I know it opens up, which is vertical. That's all I would need to know. Okay? My x is squared because it's vertical. And we're about to go through a bunch of these examples. Now I'm going to take the x value of my vertex, which is 3. Goodness. X value of the vertex, which is 3. And that sign is always going to be opposite in the equation than what it is on the graph. Then I've got 4p, which 4 times 2 would be 8. I take the y value of my vertex and put it with the y. Okay, so this is all the information I need to write the equation. You don't have to write. We're about to do a lot of examples. I just kind of want to show you the process of all that. So, looking at this, that 4p value and the focal chord, this isn't too overly important, but that 4p distance, it's measuring, if it's vertical, it's measuring this horizontal line right here. So if the p value is 2, if I go up 2, this would be 8. If I go up 4, that would be 16. Okay, so that's just kind of where that 4p comes into play. That's talking about the axis of symmetry, which you should know already. Okay, so getting into this. So the vertex on this is -2, 5. My p value is -1/2. And it has a vertical axis of symmetry. A lot of times that's how it will tell you whether it's vertical or horizontal. It'll reference the axis of symmetry. It won't say, hey, it's a vertical parabola. Okay, but your axis of symmetry and your parabola are always the same direction. So if it is a vertical parabola, what needs to be squared, x or y? X. So I'm going to use that formula right there. So I know my x needs to be squared, so I can go ahead and kind of write this much of my equation. Leave a little space there for that 4p value. If the x value of my vertex is -2, what needs to go in here with the x? +2 or -2? +2. What needs to go with the y? -5. And then I take the p value and I multiply it by 4, which, what is 4 times -1/2? What is half of 4? -2. Thank you. So that's the equation. See if you can piece together that one. I'll give you a few seconds head start. Again, it's vertical, so your x is squared. You should just be, for the most part, filling in values there. So make sure that you got this equation right here. My x value is 1, so it's x minus 1. 4 times 1/8 is 1/2. And then it's y plus 3 because that y value is -3. So going to the next problem. Horizontal axis of symmetry. So what needs to be squared, x or y? Y. What needs to go in there with the y? +1. What needs to go with the x? -6. And what is if my p value is -1/12, my 4p is -1/3. I do want to make a point here, since we just went from vertical and now we're with horizontal. A lot of people make this mistake. This spot right here in the first set of parentheses, that is not the designated spot for the x value of the vertex. A lot of people always think that the first set goes with x. The second set of parentheses, I put the y value in there. Wherever this y is, that is the y value of the vertex. If that is x, that's the x value of the vertex. Okay, and I could switch that whole parabola, or the whole equation. I could have negative 1/3 times x minus 6 equals y plus 1 squared, and it's still right. Okay, so it's not what's first and second, it's where the x and the y are. Go ahead and do that next problem and see what you get. Did anybody not get this equation? Y plus 7 squared equals 4 times x plus 5. Awesome. So let's go to this right here. So this is given the graph, and then you have to write the equation. Now, whenever I talk about the project here in a minute, depending on how you approach the project, going from the graph to the equation or going from the equation to the graph, both of those ways are going to be helpful. So you need to make sure you know how to do both. So looking at this one, what is the vertex of that parabola? 0, 0. What is my focus? 0, 3. It's going to be the point, it's always inside the parabola. What is my directrix here? Okay, and since it's a line, y equals negative 3. Alright, your directrix is always going to be x or y equals, depending on if the parabola is vertical or horizontal. Your axis of symmetry is also going to be x or y equals. So on this one, my axis of symmetry would be what? X equals 0. Right, it's right on top of the y-axis. My equation. So we're kind of getting to that part now. What is the p-value here? What is this distance right here? How many units? 3. Does that p-value, does it need to be positive or negative 3? Why positive 3? Because it's opening up. If this equation if the whole thing was flipped, the only thing that would be different is that p-value would be negative. So if my p-value is 3, then 4 times 3 is 12. So that's what you'll put in your equation. Is this parabola considered vertical or horizontal? Vertical. So what needs to be squared, x or y? X. So take your information and write that equation. Now, there's a lot of stuff up here. That is the only information you need for the equation. Your vertex and your p-value. So let's look at this. So, does it matter if I put plus or minus 0? No. Okay, 10 plus 0 is 10. 10 minus 0 is 10. Now, with that, do I need to put plus or minus 0? No. Those two things are the exact same. Okay? In fact, if you see it written on a test, if the equation is given to you, it is going to look like this. Okay? If this is an answer to a question and you write it with the zeros, that is absolutely correct. Okay, both of those are correct. You just need to know if it's given to you, it's going to look like the second one, not the one with the zeros. Okay, so let's try to go through these next 3 a little bit quicker since we kind of got an idea of it. So looking at this, Brianna, what is my vertex? 0, 0. Holly, what is the focus? What'd you say, Holly? Negative 2, 0. Nick, what is the directrix? X equals 2. Yasmin, what is the axis of symmetry? Y equals 0. So now I've got all that. So now I kind of want to start looking at my equation. Kate Sutterth, what is the p-value? 2. Does that need to be positive or negative 2? Why negative? Because it's opening to the left. Cole, is this a vertical or horizontal parabola? Horizontal. So Reese, does the x or the y need to be squared? The y. So see if you can fill in that equation. Make sure that you're not getting overwhelmed with the information you need to do that. Make sure you got that equation. And again, it could also be written in that form right there. All right, I believe it's 2 more of these without that vertex being on the origin. So on number 10, Malachi, what is the vertex?
It's 3, 2.
3, 2. Emma, what is the focus?
3, 1.
3, 1. Sophia, what's the directrix? Y. Y equals 3. Casey, what is the axis of symmetry? X equals 3. Trent, what is the p-value? Okay, positive or negative 1? Why negative? Because it's facing down. Jen, is this considered horizontal or vertical? Vertical. So what needs to be squared, x or y? X. There it is up there on the board. That's the equation you should have gotten. And let's go through one more. Elisabetta, what's the vertex on this one? Negative 4, 2. Tanner, what is the focus?
0, 2.
Rhett, the directrix?
X equals negative 8.
Nick, the axis of symmetry?
Y equals 2.
So now looking at the equation, Jen, what would the p-value be?
3.
Look at it again.
4.
4. Positive or negative 4?
Positive.
Why?
It's going to the right.
It's opening to the right. Hannah, would this be considered a vertical or horizontal parabola?
Horizontal.
So what needs to be squared, x or y?
Y.
The y. There's the equation you should have ended up with.
Wait, why is that P in the front?
Y is the what?
P in the front.
It doesn't matter. If you wrote it y minus 2 squared equals 16 times x plus 4, it's the same thing. Alright, so after that we got a few problems now given the equation, and then you're asked to graph it. So the first and probably easiest thing to find is going to be the vertex. Alright, so Brianna, what would the vertex be on this one? 3, negative 1. After that, you need to find the p-value. Which, Cole, what would the p-value be? 3. Okay, so how he found that, if you lost him with that answer. So that is your 4p value. So if 4p equals 12, you would divide 12 by 4 to get 3. Now you're always going to divide that 4p value by 4 to get the actual distance that you're going to use on the graph. After that, Kate Sutterth, which way is this parabola going to open? Mm-hmm. So first, is it vertical or horizontal?
Horizontal.
What's being squared, x or y? You looking at the same one as us up here?
Oh, X.
X, okay. So x is being squared, so it's vertical. And my p-value is positive, so which direction is it going to open? Up. So next I've got to find the focus. Let's talk about how to find the focus from here. If this parabola is opening up, and I have my vertex and I have the p-value, I'm going to go up 3 units from my vertex to find the focus. So that would be at 3, 2. I'll go in the opposite direction, but the same distance, so down 3, to find the directrix, which is going to be x equals -4. Alright, so that's a lot of people when they're graphing, they struggle with that whenever they're asked to graph the focus and the directrix. You use that p-value and use the direction that the parabola opens to find that. And then once you know that it's opens up, you can sketch that graph. Alright, let's look at the last graphing one. So first, Tanner, what is my vertex?
3,
3, 5. Reese, what is the p-value?
-1.
-1. Catherine, Todd, which direction is this going to open?
Down. I mean, left.
Left. So the y value is squared, so that tells me horizontal. P value is negative, so that makes it left. So if my vertex is at 3, 5 and my p value is -1, Jessica, where is the focus? 2, 5. And Sophia, where is the directrix? X. X equals 4. Okay, so next, these are the kind of questions where they're going to give you as little information as possible. Usually they give you 2 of the vertex, focus, and directrix. And they ask you to write the equation. It is near impossible to do this without drawing a sketch, because you got to know where those 3 things are in relation to each other. So if I've got a vertex at -3, 6, and I've got a focus at 5, 6, which way is this going to open? To the right. So what needs to be squared, x or y? If it opens to the right, the y. That makes it a right and left, means it's a horizontal parabola. What needs to go in there with my y? Plus or minus -6. What needs to go in there with the x? Plus 3. What is the p-value on this problem? what? Okay. The p-value, though, is 8. Okay, and that's just the distance from here to here. You're looking at those x values. -3 to 5, that's 8 units across. So then that 4p would be 32. Questions on how I got that equation?
Can you get the p-value by just doing the two x's distance?
Yes. And then here it is all nice and neat, but you probably, I don't know many people who can sketch a graph that looks like that. So, going to this one right here. So again, I'm going to sketch this. I've got a vertex at 2, -1. I've got my directrix at x equals 5. So with how those two things are in relation to each other, which direction is this going to open? To the left. So what needs to be squared, x or y? The y does. What needs to go with my x? What is the p-value on this one? Three. Okay. The distance from the focus to the vertex and the vertex to the directrix is the same, and they're both the p-value. So on this one I'm looking at 5, and then that 2, that x value. So that distance is 3. So is it going to... I'll put the 12 there. What am I missing? If this opens to the left, it needs to be -12. And here's it all. Here it is all nice and neat. Last one. So I've got my directrix at y equals 5. And my focus at -3, 1. So which direction is this one going to open? Down, so what needs to be squared? X. And here's kind of the tricky part here, because I've got to put my vertex in, but I don't know what is my vertex going to be, or how can I find it? Okay. The vertex is going to be in the middle of that right there. So the distance from 5, my directrix, to 1, the y value of my focus, that distance is 4. So I would go half that distance for my p-value to find that vertex. So my x value is -3. My y value is +3. It's opening down, so it's negative. 2 times 4 is 8. So essentially, this was going to be the notes, the circle part of the notes for circles. What I need you to write down there is essentially this right here. And make sure that you know that the center is HK and the radius is R. So on circles, that's all you have to know is the center point and the radius. And you can write the equation. It's always going to be x minus the x value of the center point squared plus y minus the y value of the center point squared equals radius squared. That's it. Once you have that written down, go to those first two problems on the homework, and we'll kind of walk through those. Right there. And then your radius is 5. Now, if you've forgotten what the radius is, that's the distance from the center point to the outer part of the circle. Whenever you're graphing it, from that center point, I would count up 5, right 5, down 5, and left 5 from that center point. I didn't do that right, I don't think. There's my circle. So, for my equation, anytime I see circle and I'm having to write an equation, I can always write that. Because it's going to look like that every time. If my x value is -3, what needs to go into the equation? +3. If my y value is +4, what goes in the equation? And what is 5 squared? 25. The only part that is not on these problems that you'll need to know is the domain and range. This is not hard at all. Everything on circles is going to have brackets. And for your domain, you just go from the left side, so -8, to the right side, which is +2. And then range, you'll go bottom to top. So -1 up to 9. Going to the second one. If my diameter is 14, what is the radius? 7.